All right, today we're diving into one of the most powerful tools in all of marketing and communication, the framing effect. This is basically a masterclass in how perception literally shapes reality. So, what is the framing effect? Well, it's a cognitive bias first pinned down by the brilliant minds of Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky. And at its core, it's pretty simple. The way you present information, the frame you put around it, can totally change how people feel about it, even when the underlying facts are 100% identical. And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it, especially from a consultant's point of view. You see, you're not just selling features, the nuts and bolts. You're selling the lens through which your customer sees the world and your product's perfect place in it. You're not selling a spec sheet, you're selling a whole new perspective. So here's our game plan. First, we'll tackle the core of perception itself. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of framing your product and its price. After that, I'm going to give you a strategic guide for implementation, and we'll wrap it all up with real-world examples and some common pitfalls you absolutely want to avoid. First up, the core of perception. This is the foundational idea, right? In the world we operate in, there really is no such thing as objective reality. There is only interpreted reality. And that interpretation is everything. And here's the crucial point. Framing is not optional. If you don't proactively set the stage and define the context for your product, believe me, the market will do it for you. And it almost always defaults to the laziest frames possible, either by simply comparing your price to something cheaper, or worse, by letting your competitor's story define you. You completely lose control of the narrative. Okay, now for the fun part. Let's see how this actually applies to framing your product and its purpose. We're going to get into some specific, powerful techniques here, focusing on how you highlight attributes and leverage a little psychological quirk called loss aversion. So take a look at this. This is the classic example of attribute framing. Let me ask you, would you rather have a medical procedure with a 10% mortality rate or one with a 90% survival rate? Of course, you know they're statistically identical, but they don't feel the same, do they? Not even close. The survival frame makes you feel confident, while the mortality frame sparks fear. Same fact, totally different reality. And that brings us to goal framing, which really weaponizes this idea of loss aversion. You know, all the research shows that the pain of losing something is about 2.5 times more powerful than the pleasure of gaining that exact same thing. So a gain frame, hey, get a $20 bonus. That's nice. But a loss frame, don't lose the $20 you already feel you have. That creates urgency. It's a massive shift from just promoting a benefit to helping someone avoid a loss. All right, let's level up. We're moving on to some more advanced techniques. Let's talk about framing price and story and how we can use time and narrative to completely change how people perceive value. Look at this number, $1.40. What is that? It's basically pocket change, the cost of, I don't know, maybe half a cup of coffee these days. It feels insignificant, right? Easy to just let go of? Well, what if I told you this is just the daily cost of a $500 annual subscription? See what happened there? That's temporal reframing. You take a big, psychologically heavy price and you break it down into a tiny, trivial daily expense. The financial frame is completely altered. And this slide, this is where the real magic happens. This is narrative framing. Some people even call it alchemical marketing. You're not changing the product at all, you're changing its meaning. Plastic seats suddenly become luxurious and ethical vegan leather. Unprocessed fruit is elevated to a premium farm-to-table experience. You're literally creating value out of thin air, just with words. Okay, so we've got the theory down. Now let's get super practical. How do you actually do this? This next section is your strategic playbook. This is how you choose and apply these frames in the real world. And here it is. This is the consultant's cheat sheet, the strategic framing choice matrix. It gives you a really clear path. You start on the left with a low perception data point, something that might sound weak or even negative, and you use the right kind of frame to transform it into a high-value message that triggers a very specific psychological response. So used materials becomes a sustainable heritage edition. Untested software becomes the latest evolution. It's a system for turning your perceived weaknesses into your greatest strengths. And here's how you put that matrix to work in 4 simple steps. First, you've got to identify the hot button. What's the core emotional driver for your customer? Second, you sequence your message. You have to start by establishing your points of parity, or POP, to show you belong. Then you introduce your points of difference, your POD, to show why you're special.
Third, use social proof as a frame around your claims. And finally, number 4, always frame your solution around your customer's deepest needs and fears.
Okay, to bring this all home, let's look at a really clear example of this in action and, just as importantly, talk about how to avoid the common mistakes that can cause this whole strategy to completely backfire. I mean, just look at the difference here. The ineffective frame is, well, it's just a boring statement of fact and price. It's lifeless. But the world-class frame? That is a masterpiece. It uses a temporal reframe, the cost of one dinner out, in a powerful narrative frame, investing in a permanent transformation. It's not selling gym equipment. It's selling an outcome. It's selling a new identity. That is the power of this.
But, and this is a huge but, you have to be careful. Framing only works if it's built on a foundation of truth. You can't bridge a credibility gap with just clever words. And don't muddle your message by trying to be everything to everybody. And please avoid the lipstick on a pig trap. If your product is flawed, a fancy frame won't fix it. In fact, it'll just make the backlash even worse. Remember this, framing amplifies the truth. It doesn't invent it. So, to wrap this all up, I want to leave you with a few foundational truths. As the marketing legends Al Ries and Jack Trout once said, it's all about the battle for the mind. The best product doesn't always win. The product that is perceived as the best wins. And why does framing work so well? Well, it's because of this simple human truth from Brian Tracy. It works because it speaks directly to our emotional brain first. That decision to buy, to trust, to believe, it all happens on an emotional level. The logic just shows up later to justify the decision that's already been made. And we'll end with this incredibly powerful thought from Rory Sutherland, which really is the core of everything we've talked about. The value you build in someone's mind through strategic framing is just as real, just as tangible, and just as important as the physical thing you create in a factory. It's not about trickery, it's about revealing the most potent and compelling version of your truth.